All right, jumping right into it. This is day number 45, 365-day journey breaking into IT. The reason for the length of the time, it lines up with me finishing my 4-year degree, bachelor's degree in an unrelated field. Um, and that'll be graduating with a bachelor degree. And that last four remaining electives are all IT related. So looking forward to that. I am either going to be entering a well-respected software boot camp, a full stack boot camp in March if I can get the funding for that. In the meantime, my goal is to get the Security Plus this year, 2025, and before the end of March to get the CYSA, so the Cybersecurity Architect Plus. Get those two certifications before beginning, and during that time, I'm also working on learning Python on my own. So starting to begin that process just in case funding doesn't come through for the web development boot camp. That's linked to one of my a job from one of my friends. He has a degree in IT and learned to code. So that's the route. So really found an interest in cybersecurity and knowing that there's work to be done. It's coming from no experience. I'm doing this to be able to provide for my family. I before transitioning back to further education. So in the meantime, I'll be, the goal is to secure a full-time position um, so that we can provide for my wife and our first child and making all that work. So right now, TryHackMe going through, I'm going to be preparing essentially for security as if I do not qualify or get the funding for the tech boot camp that starts in March. So I'm doing everything I can as far as learning and secure everything I can for self-teaching and security in the meantime. Because even if and I want to learn all of these things because even if I begin as a web developer for a few years, being able to continue to grow and gain these security certifications will put me in a good position one day to have a more responsible or a higher cybersecurity position if that's where I end up leading down the road after. Sometimes it is who you know. If I'm able to get a position at my friend's place, his place of employment, and start off there, and maybe be able to transition to something else as I continue to develop these skills on my own. So right now, learning about Linux. Hopefully the audio is good. Please let me know in the comments if the audio is good or bad or what's going on here. Don't have my normal setup for my camera because I just completely redesigned my setting here. So the last thing will be setting up my computer setup. Let's jump in.
Maybe you've had some practice and you want to polish things up and get additional practice to really solidify those Linux skills. If so, you are in the right place. Today we're going to be going through the first part of the Linux Fundamentals series, and I recommend going through all three of them. And these are really going to help solidify your Linux skills into making you a professional. That being said, let's go ahead and dive right into Task 1, Introduction. Welcome to the first part of Linux Fundamentals Room Series. You're most likely using a Windows or a Mac machine. Both are different in visual design and how they operate. Just like Windows, iOS, and Mac OS, Linux is just another operating system and one of the most popular in the world, powering smart cars, Android devices, supercomputers, home appliances, enterprise servers, and more. Linux is kind of everywhere, and yes, a bunch of things such as Android are just Linux under the hood. A lot of game consoles are actually just Linux under the hood because can be trimmed down pretty heavily and customized very, very heavily as well. We'll briefly touch on that throughout the room just to give you some background knowledge. That being said, let's go ahead and continue. We'll be covering some of the history behind Linux and then eventually starting your journey of being a Linux wizard. This room will have you running your very first commands in an interactive Linux machine in your browser, teaching you some essential commands used to interact with the file system, and it will introduce you to how users and groups work on Linux and what that means for us as penetration testers or just security professionals in general. Let's go ahead and mark this as completed and move into task 2, a bit of background on Linux. Where is Linux used? It's fair to say that Linux is a lot more intimidating to approach than operating systems such as Windows. Both variants have their own advantages and disadvantages. For example, Linux is much more lightweight, and you'd be surprised to know that there's a good chance you use Linux in some form or another every day. Linux powers things such as websites you visit. Most websites are hosted on Linux servers with Apache or another server that's running them. Car entertainment, control panels, a lot of those will run stripped down versions of Android or Linux as an embedded system. Point of sale systems such as checkout tills and registers in shops. Yep, very common for those to be Linux. Critical infrastructures such as traffic light controllers or industrial sensors. A lot of times those will be very heavily trimmed down versions of Linux such as Alpine or something even thinner. That's definitely something that I recommend looking into, just traffic controllers and things like that. It's very interesting because those are controlled by just basic operating systems like Linux. Let's talk about the flavors of Linux rather. The name Linux is actually an umbrella term for multiple OSs that are based on the Unix, another operating system. Unix is the, I guess, overarching flavor for how the operating system is designed, and Linux is multiple like flavors of operating systems that fit under that. When we say flavors, there are many different styles of Linux with little different tweaks, ways that they function, different package managers. Don't worry about knowing this right now. Just have a general background knowledge that there's a bunch of different kinds of Linux. Thanks to Unix being open source, variants of Linux come in all shapes and sizes, suited best for what the system is being used for. For example, Ubuntu and Debian are some of the more commonplace distributions of Linux because they're really extensible. So, for example, you can run Ubuntu as a server, such as for websites or web applications, or as a fully fledged desktop. You can install a GUI on that.
Gonna go ahead and restart this. I mean, is the only option? There we go. Okay, before it was only loading just this right here. Maybe I click through. Okay. Welcome to the first part of Linux Fundamentals Room. You're most likely using a Windows or a Mac machine. Both are different in visual and design and how they operate. Just like Windows, iOS, and macOS, Linux is just another operating system and one of the most popular in the world, powering smart cars, Android devices, supercomputers, home appliances, enterprise servers, and more. Have you guys used Linux at all? I'm not sure. I'm using a MacBook Pro. I don't know if I've ever used Linux. There's a good chance it looks like that I have. I guess maybe with some of the Android phones, like early on when they first came out. I've been using pretty much an Apple person since then. Let me know if you've used Linux and what did you use it for. Thanks. If you leave that comment, let me know. Just interested to see what everybody's experience is with Linux because for me it's relatively new. So let's see here. Let's go over here with this. Okay. All right, so just another operating system. We'll be covering some of the history behind Linux and then eventually starting your journey of being a Linux wizard. Has anybody got their certifications? Linux Plus. I kind of have a timeline of this year, Security Plus. I'm also a full-time student, so Security Plus this year, and then the first part of the first quarter of 2026, the cybersecurity architect, so the CYSA plus certificate next, and then potentially, depending on what happens with whether I'm entering the boot camp or not, depending on funding, will either be teaching myself Python but I may go ahead and get like the Linux Plus first, just to get some more familiarity coming from no background, but will certainly be pretty much at that point after March. I want to teach myself Python, so that's kind of the journey. So let's see here. All right, we'll be covering some history behind Linux, running your very first commands in an interactive Linux machine in your browser, teaching you some essential commands used to interact with the file system, and demonstrate how you can read, search for files, and introduce shell operators. So I'll complete that. Let's see, YouTube, brain. Let's see here. Let's see. Focus. What if is there something like Brain FM? I love Brain FM. Don't like to pay for Brain FM. Um, but let's see. Testing. Okay, that's my own audio.
This is a focus track, clinically proven in large-scale studies to increase focus up to 10 times when compared to
Really
non-focus
enjoy.
It works best with headphones, so grab a pair, settle in,
Brain
and get
FM.
ready for the most productive 30 minutes of your day. For unlimited listening, head over to brain.fm or follow the link in the description below.
All right, back to this. It's fair to say that Linux, where is Linux? Is a lot more intimidating approach than operating systems such as Windows. It's a lot more intimidating to approach. Both variants have their own advantages and disadvantages. For example, Linux is considerably much more lightweight, and you'd be surprised to know that there's a good chance you've used it in some form or another every day. Linux powers things such as websites that you visit, car entertainment, control panels, point of sale, POS systems such as checkout tills and registers and shops, critical infrastructures such as traffic light controllers or industrial sensors. Flavors of Linux. The name Linux is actually an umbrella term for multiple OS that are based on Unix, another operating system. Thanks to Linux being open source, variants of Linux come in all shapes and sizes suited best for what the system is being used for. For example, Ubuntu, and Debian are some of the more commonplace distributions of Linux because it is so extensible. You can run Ubuntu as a server. Ubuntu. Am I pronouncing that right? Somebody let me know. Ubuntu. Ubuntu as a server, such as websites and web applications. Work for this, so okay, so you can run Ubuntu as a server, such as websites and web applications, or as a fully fledged desktop. For this series, we're going to be using Ubuntu. Ubuntu server can run on systems with only 512 megabytes of RAM. Wow. Similar to how you have different versions of Windows 7, 8, and 10, there are many different versions, distributions of Linux. What year was the first release of the Linux operating system? I didn't see that question anywhere. Like, is that, hopefully it wasn't the guy talking about that. So, nope, wasn't here. So I assume they want me to search this. We're going to use, let's see. Linux. What was the first year that Linux came out? Not the best way to communicate that, I think. Their question was much better, but that's what I got right now. It is 4 in the morning. Have not had a chance to sleep. Had a quiz and some reading to do on information systems and information technology in my class, and I still have a chapter to read, but I'm going to have to wait, get a little bit of sleep, but I must continue to practice and prepare practical skills, and TryHackMe has been a blessing for that. Oh yeah, I will, and I believe that'll be hopefully in the first 6 months of next year, get the SOC analyst certification with TryHackMe. That's just a no-brainer. I'm going to do that. So this question here, that's weird. So let's just search. Oh my, looks like my mouse battery is not doing so well. I'm not given this information. Can you please explain it to me? What year was the first release of a Linux operating system? Let me grab these batteries. Oh. Definitely standing up. Only way I could kind of... It says 1. Man, this is weird. What would Claude say? That's pretty useless, isn't it? 1. What are your thoughts? The user is asking about the year. Linux says really they previously inquired about this and got the answer. $1991 is the answer. Boom. 1991, man. All right, this room has an Ubuntu. I'm gonna see. I gotta figure out how to pronounce this. Anybody know how do you pronounce this? Okay, so I need to bring my search over here. How do you pronounce this? Ubuntu. Ubuntu. I guess I was right. The word comes from humanity. I am because we are. Interconnectedness. Interesting. Interesting choice of words. All right. Let's see here. Linux came out in 1991. I think I'll probably remember that. Simply start the machine. However, to get started, I'm going to start the machine. Okay, I got my Linux system, I guess. Let's maybe... Yeah. Let's expand this. It's funny how that's showing on there. I don't know what the password is. uh... All right, let's follow along. I developed my first Linux. What does it want me to do? I started the machine. Does that mean I developed it? Wants to play, a card will appear at the top of the room. I'm not seeing any card. Oh, is it okay? A card at the top of the room here. Okay, it's giving me 2 hours, so it's a legitimate virtual machine. This is pretty cool. Pretty cool, pretty cool. I'm gonna go ahead and put a new batteries in my mouse. Man, these old Magic mice, they just burn through batteries. And I try to turn it off every time. Shocked. Might be time to just use the new one. Let's see here. Hey. Alright, so I guess I did develop my first machine. So I'm going to continue on, let's see, running your first few commands in Linux. So we have the terminal here. As we previously discussed, a large selling point of using operating systems such as Ubuntu is how lightweight they can be. This of course doesn't come without its disadvantages, where, for example, often there is no GUI, graphical user interface. Let's make sure we have that acronym. Lots of acronyms. GUI, do we have that one? Graphical, yes we do. User interface. or what is also known as a desktop environment that we can use to interact with the machine unless it has been installed. A large part of interacting with the system is using the terminal. The terminal is purely text-based and is intimidating at first. However, if we break down some of the commands after some time, you quickly become familiar using the terminal. This is what the terminal looks like. So the commands down there. We need to be able to navigate to files, output their contents, and make files. The commands to do so are self-explanatory once you know what they are, of course. That right now, just around other than Wi-Fi. Also, version very excited much about this 19 Mac Pro. My 222 Mac doesn't really has that. It's only a couple of times at this point. Man, I'm not sure that it's the virtual system adding a lot. We're going to be trying to sit here. It looks like it doesn't look like it's my browser here. See the bits I have here. Yeah, not as could be do much of anything. I think. More how my audio is going. Looks like it's still coming through, but with this virtual machine up here, it really be showing. Ooh, something too. Oh, so I'm sure that it was plugged in, isn't it? Let me check why this wasn't working. It might be helpful. At least we're plugged in. There's no way that the battery is not charging at this point. Let me see. Okay, let's see here. We are getting a little bit of responsiveness. Let's see, responsiveness. Let's see. Just streaming is going to be more difficult, but I can easily just plug in and probably not have any issues with that. Inspect. Interesting. Where are the photos? Thumbnail, tech, profile, image. Image one, and then, okay. So for example, what they're asking me to do, kind of like here. I get the info for this picture. How do I get info for it? Okay, so then you All right, we're going to finish task 4 and then call it quits. Let's see. So see the snippets, and okay. So yeah, let's get started with two of the first commands, which I have broken down in the table below. Command description. Command description. Echo output any text that we provide. Who am I? Find out user release and logged into. See the snippets. It still says it though. Wonder why that is. Who am I can be used to find the username we are logged in. TryHackMe. Boom, it should be that. We did it. Task 4. Okay. Anybody, thanks for bearing with me. New system, so there's some issues with um, the speed. I did not have the computer. The computer was literally about to die. I think we've kind of like sped up a little bit since then. So I got to really see how much this 2019 MacBook Pro. It's got the 16-inch screen. That's why I'm using it, because I do a lot around that, working as well around the house. So having this screen rather than the 13-inch is much easier. But if the M2 is that much better for streaming, then I can just essentially just have the M2 set up here and be just fine. I think the challenge is just being able to use multiple screens. So, all right. Well, if you want to break into IT, you can follow this journey. You could do it too. Um, Follow the journey. It's worth it if you have a goal. My goal is to be able to support my family while continuing further education, if that is what God calls me to do. So, again, God bless you, and make sure you tell your family that you love them. Take care.